I think people try to avoid stress for they want the peace and the comfort that comes with no stress. But stress can tell you all kinds of things. There's ways to manage stress. I'm a faith person, so I believe there's a spiritual side to it, but there's a very practical side. What you eat, how you exercise, what you do makes a big difference in how stress affects you. Circumstances of life are going to be there. It can be as simple as forgetting to do something and arriving 15 minutes late. You can't get there fast enough because you failed to leave on time. Or it can be a major stress. 10 years ago, I went through what you'd call a major stress. It was an 18-month journey when my wife found out that she had a glioblastoma brain tumor, and it took us 18 months of progressive time before she died and left this world. But that was a different kind of stress. That was something you could not get away from because you arrived 15 minutes late.
Welcome to They're Not Like Us, the podcast where bold ideas and inspiring stories come to life. I'm your host, Aaron, here to challenge the norms and ignite your potential. If you're ready to level up, don't forget to subscribe and join the movement. Now, let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to They're Not Like Us. I'm your host, Aaron, and today I'm joined by Larry Onan. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you very much, Aaron. It's glad to be with you this morning.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on. So can you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, yes, I'm a preacher's kid from way back in the dark ages. I was born in 1944 at the end of the World War II. I was born in the season of recovery from World War II, and so that had a lot of impact on my life. I was born in a small town in western Colorado of the United States. It was a progressive, growing town, but it was a rural community that was becoming the largest city between Denver and Salt Lake City. So I was one high school, one world, one way of thinking. Ended up at the University of Colorado, graduated from there in 1966 with a degree in English and theater arts, and thought I was going to go into education as a result of my education. My greater dream before then was to end up either in New York or Hollywood because I knew I was going to be on the stage or directing theater. But I had a radical change in my college years at the University of Colorado, and that moved me into a different direction. But life has been a journey of learning every single day. And one experience helps you learn another. You might think of the world of stress. But, stress can be your friend, actually your friend, if you just learn to accept the boundaries the stress is trying to speak to you about. So I lived a life of stress. Many people live a life of confusion. I don't think mine was confusion, but it did have some stress to it. And those high points actually made me a better person. So in my years of experience, a lot of stress, a lot of life learning skills, a lot of failure. In the sense of, I was told years ago, Larry, you got the freedom to fail. It's not a bad news. All you do if you fail is get up and figure out what you did as a result of that, dust off your shoes and try it again. So I never saw something like that where I could not go do it. I just thought, well, it's better to try it and fail a little bit and then try again. And that's been really life to me in many, many respects. So you're getting up all the time, dusting off and running again. So that's what life is. So that's a little bit of my journey of life in a quick nutshell.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about stress as well, actually, because we all try so hard to avoid stress, right? But we need to have that little bit. It's the whole, live outside the comfort zone kind of thing. Because if we have no stress, then we're not growing, are we? We're just kind of rotting in this kind of place that we've already created for ourselves. So we're not moving forward. So we need to push a little bit.
You got to push. And I think people try to avoid stress for they want the peace and the comfort that comes with no stress. But stress can tell you all kinds of things. There's ways to manage stress. I'm a faith person, so I believe there's a spiritual side to it. But there's a very practical side. What you eat, how you exercise, what you do makes a big difference in how stress affects you. Circumstances of life are going to be there. It can be as simple as forgetting to do something and arriving 15 minutes late. You can't get there fast enough because you failed to leave on time. Or it can be a major stress. 10 years ago, I went through what you'd call a major stress. It was an 18-month journey when my wife found out that she had a glioblastoma brain tumor, and it took us 18 months of progressive time before she died and left this world. But that was a different kind of stress. That was something you could not get away from because you arrived 15 minutes late. Also, when you find out some of those kind of things, in my case, the glioblastoma, when I started studying it the first night, I knew she had something. I didn't even know what the term was. I looked it up in medical journals, and it says this terminal disease is treated in this way. Well, when you realize you're looking at a terminal disease, that's introducing you to a stress that you cannot get away from. Because sooner or later, it's going to take you out of this world. And so it can be extreme stress. It can be family impacted. It can be a job. It can be mistakes that we make in life. But stress does have, but I learn from them all the time. I think we need to keep on learning all the time. And we shouldn't be looking at the stress factor as something that's setting us back. It's actually signals that's helping us move forward. So I'm a big one on managing it. I think there's a high degree of spiritual impact around the word stress because I think it's how I grow my faith muscle. If I face stress correctly, I grow from it. If I don't face it correctly, I'm going to probably suffer from it.
Yeah, and like you say, there are different types of stress. I'm so sorry to hear about your wife, Larry. That's must have been really difficult for you.
Well, it was difficult, but it was a part of life. I mean, I think sometimes we say, okay, I'm going to fall apart. In fact, I had friends in that moment. They said, Larry, we're here for you. When you collapse, we're here to pick you up. I never collapsed because I had a biblical perspective about where she was. But I also knew that in my journey of life, there's times when I've just got to face difficult times. And if we see that as a journey of victory rather than a journey of defeat, I think it makes a big difference. And so I think it's a perspective of how we walk into things like that, Aaron. Yes. Would you say I would like to live through it again? No, I wouldn't. Would you say I miss having my best friend around? Well, yes, I do. But that doesn't change the perspective of I'm here for a purpose and I need to live out that purpose. And her purpose just cut her life shorter. I mean, to me, that's what happened. So, yes, I appreciate the sympathy, but I grew from it to the point that I'm a better person as a result of living through that. But if you'd asked me to vote for it and go that way, no, I would not have voted for that. I don't vote that for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is testament to you, how you've been a positive, that's come from it. Obviously, it's difficult, and nobody wants to go through that. But the fact that you're still pushing on and continuing, and I'm sure that's what she would want for you anyway, because nobody wants somebody they love to, when I'm gone, I don't want my kids or people who love me to ruin their own lives by being too upset to continue doing what they need to do.
Well, yesterday I was working through some old files in my computer. Everybody's got a pile of files that they've never looked at. I came across one that I wrote about 9 years ago. It's called the I Wills and how I choose to live my life going forward. Now, that was about a year after her death, but it was a series of 10 or 12 things that I'm choosing to do because I'm making choices. If you do not make choices and decide how you're going to do something and write them down, because I think the choice in our brain is one thing. When I write it down, I have an old saying that I do a lot of consulting with nonprofit organizations in their area of governance. And I always tell them the basic principles of governance, if it's not in writing, it does not exist. It doesn't exist in your brain when you just think about it. It's not the dream. But I've gone back to that page probably periodically, not every single day, but probably once a year I'll run into that thing again. And I remind myself that I put those things in writing and I'm still committed to those things. And so I made some choices back there that I choose to live life a certain way. And by the very fact that I wrote those things down, I made commitments to myself, kind of a covenant to Larry. And it made a world of difference. Now, I don't go every single day and say, okay, how am I supposed to be living today? But the very fact that I wrote them down and I edited them, I worked on them, I wanted that to be something for me. And believe it or not, finding it yesterday, it had probably been 3 years since I'd seen the document. I thought that is still me today because those are commitments that I made 3 years ago. And I think a lot of people that are trying to figure out life are trying to just think it out. You don't think things out. Your thinking is the beginning of a process of commitments and covenants that you're making. And if you write them down, you can edit them, you can fix them. I write documents knowing that the next step for my clients and the people that I'm helping is they're going to go through an editing process. They're going to ask questions. They're going to be refining it to meet their needs. But if it's not in writing, it's just a dream. And so, there's an element there where we need to, in life, say, okay, this is what I choose to do. And by making 5 or 6 commitments to what you're going to do, and I'm not talking about just word logic of, kind of this new thought religious thing where you say it and it becomes a reality. You write it down so that you can use it as a roadmap. And my roadmap does not have to be looked at every day. If I'm going to drive from my home in Los Angeles, California area to Dallas, Texas, I'm going to be looking for a map that takes me to Dallas, Texas, not to Seattle, Washington. That's the opposite direction. But by having a roadmap, I'm looking to see how I get to Dallas, Texas. Now, if I decided to go to Seattle, I would not be driving out, in my case, to eastern part of the United States, heading to Seattle, Washington, because it's straight north of Los Angeles. It's a 24-hour drive, but it's still north. It's not the other direction. So I think we got to sometimes in life of ourselves say, this is what I'm choosing to do. And yes, I can make changes. I can edit. I can take some of those commitments off, but at least I'm editing my life rather than just living in oblivion and hoping that it comes out right. Because if we're living that way, we're going to have a mess on our hands down the way.
Yeah, from my experience, a lot of people live that way, Larry, at the minute. I've been guilty of it as well myself, where I don't really writing down aside, even in my head, I've not had a clear plan of what I want to achieve or where I want to go. And at which point, it's like you say, it's trying to drive somewhere without a sat nav or without a map. You just kind of aimlessly wandering around, hoping that you'll get to some destination, but you don't know what that destination is. So it's no wonder things kind of don't go your way when you think or live like that.
Well, we're all used to, in our cultures today, across Europe and across the United States, probably other parts of the world too, Asia, maybe not as much in Africa, but other places you go, the GPS is a critical part of life anymore. We punch in where we're going, we put in an address. Well, in a sense, you're putting in writing, where do I want to head? What's the address? Well, GPS then helps us define left and right and straight ahead and go a quarter of a mile and do this and do that. So we're relying on technology for some in a degree of writing. Now, many of us have lived through life. I think many people don't understand that the consequences of what they did even 10 or 15 years ago has an impact on them today. I was counseling with a gentleman that's probably 5 years younger than I am. He's probably 75 years of age. A great little guy, but because of drugs and his lifestyle of 30 years ago, he's got a 12-year-old mentality. And he cannot fix that because he burned his brain out basically on drugs. The consequences of his drug habit have countered his life forever. And so he gets under stress much easier than I do because he's always thinking like a 12-year-old. What's going to happen? I haven't heard from so-and-so yet. They haven't called me back yet. So he's living in a sense of tension because his 12-year-old brain and a 75-year-old body is just not quite connecting. And I have compassion for my friend because he's not a bad guy. He's not loopy, but there was consequences as a result of what he was doing. And he never was thinking about that back 30 years ago when he was really into his drug habit. So a lot of times we want things to change as a result of the conditions that we already laid out for ourselves. So if I'm doing certain things that are incorrect and it's going to lead me down a way, I'm going to live with those probably for the rest of my life. That doesn't mean I can't be forgiven for mistakes, but the consequences of behavior do come with the territory. Sometimes I think a person goes into business, works with a bad partner, makes a disaster of things, goes into bankruptcy, and has to live with the consequences of what that means for the rest of their life. It wasn't necessarily a bad choice. It was a choice that he could have chosen to do differently. And if that person wasn't alert to it, they could have lived in oblivion for a long time. But consequences do come with the behavior that you have. It's the law of the harvest. Um, the Bible's full of examples of the law of the harvest. A farmer doesn't go out and plant and then take a vacation for the next 2 years and just hope to come back that there's a harvest. He takes care of it. He has things to do, and the consequences of his managing the harvest as it grows is going to have a lot to do with the impact. In my backyard, my neighbor's got a beautiful orange tree. It has produced oranges for 25 years. The new neighbor moves in, does not realize that you've got to water citrus trees differently than you water grass. And so they've been watering grass and they've killed the tree pretty much because they were not going into the deep root system of the tree. The consequences of that tree, I had an arborist look at it a week ago, and the question is, can we pull it out? Is it even possible to revive this tree? The conditions of what happened in the last 2 years have destroyed a part of the root system. And now we got to also say, can we manage it? Can we bring it back? What are we going to do? We're looking to options, but the options are not going to bring back the tree that was there 3 years ago. It's going to bring back another edition of the tree. Maybe we'll get some good fruit, but the consequences of not having water. I live in an area where there were thousands and thousands of citrus all over the place here 30 years ago. And I drive by those same orchards now, and there's dead trees because they're getting ready to tear them down and build houses. Those trees lived and survived and produced for 40, 50 years. Beautiful, beautiful fruit that went all over the United States. It's now useless acreage because there's a different purpose. So the consequences are going to make a difference on what we do in life. And we just got to live with that reality is I blew it back here. Now I've got to learn how to adjust my life. I see people with type 2 diabetes and other things, and I look at their lifestyle and I'm thinking, it's what you were drinking 10 or 15 years ago. It was the way you were eating. It was other things that were going on in your life. And now you're living with the consequences of not feeding your body correctly. You may never be able to fully correct that because the consequences were laid out by the way you were living. That doesn't mean you can't survive it and make a good lifestyle, but you've got to monitor something else because of that consequence. So there is in my experience, there is a lot to do with what you're going to sow is what you're going to reap. And you can't just forget the thing as a result of the consequences will be there, Eric.
Absolutely. And I think whatever we do in life, there's a price to pay. So either, we do the right thing up front. I mean, you pay the price for that, whether it's, kind of eating healthy and not kind of falling into that comfort zone and doing whatever you want to do, or we work hard at things and we get the rewards down the line, or we take the easy route and the easy option. Sorry, my dogs are going wild in the background here. I take the easy option. But then we pay for that down the road later on, don't we? With the consequences of not working hard or not eating right and stuff like that.
Well, not giving a detail to what you got to do to follow it up. My life for 50 years was tied around fund development, major donor development for nonprofits. I was on a board probably over 15 years ago, and the organization for some activities they were doing received a $500,000 gift from a man in the Midwestern United States that did not know him well, but was really impressed with what they were making, the choices that they were making at the time. Well, I knew a little bit about that person's background and his family, and I kept saying to the organization, you really need to build a relationship with that person. He gave you that because he was impressed by your stance, but he's not a relational person yet to you. He just gave you money because he was trying to encourage you. You've got to build a relationship. Well, the organization really had too many other things doing. You had to travel across the United States. It was going to cost money. It was going to take time. We don't know him that well. How do we build that? We're really busy doing all of our good works in our ministry. We are not going to go see him. There was a few phone calls, a few attempts, but because they did not take care of the relationship, he waned in his interest in what they were doing. Now I'm talking to the third generation CEO of the organization, and he says, how do we recover from what we did wrong? And I said, recovering from this one, you're probably not going to recover. Let's just come to grips with the fact that you had a window of opportunity to do it right, and you decided not to do it right. So yes, I can say I can guarantee you that if you'd done it right, there was 10 times more money available to you in the future. But because you chose to do other things, making those choices, that you're not going to recover from what somebody else did wrong. We've got to build it differently. Now, it's nice to say that when we first started this big initiative, that we got a $500,000 gift, but it just was a come and go, because we were making other decisions that we thought were higher priority and more important. Or maybe, frankly, the CEO at that time just didn't like the idea of developing relationships and fundraising. And the consequences had an impact. And unfortunately, 2 people lost. The ministry organization, the nonprofit, lost more relational money. The person that gave the money had a sense of failure in giving it with his stewardship because he never really saw the outcome that he wanted to see. Now, the outcome is pretty good. The organization has done some remarkable things. But the person that gave the money, the steward that invested in the future, was not blessed by being close to it, so where he could say, this was a good investment in the future, because the relationship was pretty much gone. So, it's in marriage, it's in family. Sure, there's people out there that kids that are wandering all over the place. What kind of a relationship are you building there that they want to even hang around with you? It's not that they need you now because you weren't there then. That may be a young family, a father that's preoccupied with business, and now he can't get 2 cents of time with his kids. In my case of grandkids, I've got 6 grandkids, one on 23 years of age on one end and one 10 years old on the other. Every one of my grandkids likes spending time with me because I'm intentionally putting time in them. I have to go out of my way. It's not easy to find as an 80-year-old, how do I have a good 2-hour, 3-hour time with a 10-year-old? And then I got to switch gears and I got to relate to 2 kids that one's out of college and one's in his junior year in college. Those are 2 extremes. I've got to do something related to their interests. And they talk technology and they talk other kinds of stuff. The 10-year-old wants to go out hiking and he wants to run and he wants to do other things. I've got to adjust to the realities of what's in front of me to make it a win-win relationship with all 6 of them. One of my grandkids is a Downs child. Well, I got to relate to her very differently because of conditions that I cannot solve for her. But it's very different to work with her for 2 to 3 hours and have a meaningful connection. But I do know, because I'm intentional in doing those things, I've got a relationship with all 6 of them. And I've got to work on that all the time. When I start my year off, every year I say, what 3 things can I do this year with each one of my grandkids? And I've got to be intentional on that planning, or what's going to happen? I'm just not going to do it. Because it'd be much easier to just travel all the time and see them maybe next Christmas, because that's the easy way out. So this year I got season tickets for a theater group, and they do 12 shows a year. So every single month I'm taking somebody in that family, those 2 families, to a theater performance. That's one way to sit with them and watch the show together. And I'm taking my Downs child and my youngest granddaughter to Peter Pan. But the next time I'm going to take 2 other boys to Monte Cristo, because there's difference to how you relate to those boys. And the boys relate differently to the girls. So I've got to be intentional. I think life has got to be, what do I do today that's going to make my help somebody else or fulfill my purpose or what I have in life? And that's intentionality.
Yeah, I like that. And ultimately as well, we are a social animal, so you could apply that to every area of your life, really, can't you? Because ultimately, we can't do anything alone, really. We're all interconnected. So if we want to do business, we need people to be our customers. So we need to build relationships there, or we might have a supplier that supplies us with stuff that we might need to have a relationship there. Obviously, we've got family and friends and other things like that. So we could apply that kind of theory, that concept to pretty much everything that we do, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, again, when I get up in the morning, one of my first things is a prayer, basically, of how am I going to be used today with the skills and the abilities that I've got? And guide me as I walk through today and help me identify the pitfalls that I could maybe drop into off of neglect or just ignorance. That's intentionality. Every day is waking up to say, how can I be intentional today? How can I make this productive? Uh, I really believe that every one of us are gifted with unique skills and abilities. And I'm a big one on helping a person identify what those skills and abilities really are. Because I think some people have aspirations to do something and they may even have education to do that, but that's not them. I remember one young guy I was working with. He really wanted to be a CPA, an accountant, and deal with the money. Why did he want to do it? Well, he saw some other friends of his that were ahead of him, and they were making good money. They were in the top firms. It looked like this is the way to go, and he was pretty good with numbers. So he got his degree and got his accounting and got us all set up, got his certificate, his license to do the job, went into the world of the CPA world and hated it the first 2 weeks he was in the business. Why? Because that kind of a business, if you go into a large firm in Great Britain and you're the CPA doing the audit on the company, nobody will talk to you the entire time you're doing the audit. You're asking all the questions. There's nobody. They've been told you don't build a relationship with the auditor. And his first year of survival was, this is miserable because they leave me in a cubbyhole to look at their numbers and nobody will have a relationship with me. There was nobody to go after work out and build relationships because they're basically told he's the auditor. He's looking at this. You give him what he needs, but you don't build a relationship. And he realized all of a sudden, I'm in a world where I need people, and I'm in an occupation that almost demands to get in the cubby and just leave yourself alone and figure it out. Well, he ended up going into the business of recruiting accountants and business people because his personality was driven toward interacting with people. Now, he's using his skills and ability, but it was a miserable experience at first because what he thought he was going to do because he wanted to make the money was the most miserable thing he ever could live through. So I think sometimes we got to say, okay, who am I? How am I created? What am I supposed to be doing? And then I learned to put my life around those particular things. And Aaron, there's people I can say to them real easy, no, you don't want me helping you do that. Number one, I don't care for the subject. Number two, I'm not good in it. There's things I'm good at that I can help you with, but you don't want me to do X. And so I live my life in my strengths. I don't live my life trying to overcome my weaknesses. And I know what my weaknesses are. And that doesn't mean I can't do my weakness. That doesn't mean my training does not allow me to do that. But you know what happens when we work in our weakness? We are exhausted at the end of the day. It just wipes us out because we're doing something that we may academically know how to do, but it's not rewarding to us in our personality of who we are. So, for an individual, it's, saying, well, I really want to do this. I say, okay, you got to do accounting. Well, I don't like accounting. Well, in business, you got to do accounting. You got to look at the numbers. Now, you can hire some people to help you. You can do it yourself and know that that's just a means to your other ends. But you got to be looking at this thing with what energizes me in the day, not what makes me miserable in the day. And when I have to do income tax or when I have to work on my financial numbers, even though I'm in the fund development business, I'm not a numbers guy in that sense. I'm a relational person. So even at that particular point, I say, okay, I've got to get help. I have a website. I learned early on that I'm not going to learn how to run the website. I've got to get somebody that's good at making the website work. It tells me what's really going on. I can tell them what I want on it, and I can tell them why it's got to be there. Excuse me, but I'm not going to try to do what's in my weakness. I'm just going to find somebody else that has that strength and have them help me. So it's a team effort that gets us through life. It's not us all doing it ourselves. I think entrepreneurs are stuck with doing it all the beginning, all by themselves. And but you've got to learn how to rely on a team of people to make life possible. Sometimes it's the husband-wife team. Sometimes it's a small business relationships. If you're in a nonprofit, it's working with other volunteers and making things happen there. But we've got to be thinking teamness all the time. And we got to be thinking about who can help me in my area of weakness and embrace it as a weakness and don't try to major in that. I know that's my weakness, so why should I keep on trying to do it? You don't buckle down and do a weakness forever and ever. If you do, you're going to be a pretty tired person at the end of every day.
Yeah,
So
I couldn't agree more with
find
that. And
people to help.
ultimately as well, I ultimately, right, I look at it from most jobs I've worked and the most places I've worked, they want you to be a generalist. They want you to do everything, even the stuff that you're not very good at. And they kind of force that upon you. No, you need to get better at this. You need to. Well, you might have a colleague who's really good at it. Why are we not using them to do that while I focus on what I'm good at? And surely that will drive everything forward and everything will be better and people will be happier. They'll have more purpose. Because the things you're good at kind of fulfill you a bit more as well, because you think, I'm doing a good job. You feel like you're contributing more.
My wife was, she loved the details. She was an administrative assistant to a major nonprofit president. She just loved getting up every day and cleaning up behind him. And then when we married, she just loved helping me with all the details. And so for 45 years, we just worked hand in glove because I conceptualized, I worked on the details and she took them and turned them into something. And then she would help me correct, and now I've got to use Grammarly and I got to use other tools because she's no longer there to do what she did well for 25, 30 years for me. And so I've had to find out different people to come on board, and her skill package was exactly what I needed. And somebody else's skill is going to help you win. And you're going to help them win by having their fulfillment is going to be higher because they did really what they did well. So I think when we're looking at a life, who is going to help you win? Who's going to help you walk together? It's a partnership. A partnership is this way. It's not two people walking this way. It's where we hold hands together and we feel the flesh and the blood, and we're doing it together. And in my nonprofit experience, I started with a major international nonprofit Christian organization. I started the fund development really by mistake. I didn't know what I was doing. I was given an assignment. That doesn't mean the organization had not been raising money, but it was more raising money like you pop popcorn. You turn the heat up and then you just hope that it works. And this was a structured way of taking steps and stages in growth and advancement to raise the resources that the organization needed. Well, when I started off, there was 2 people. 10 years later, we had 125 people in 7 departments. Now, I was responsible for them. I was the lead person for all of that. I had a lot of the ideas that created it. But what I found out is if I gave away my area of responsibility to a person that was better and they owned it, they really did a good job of it. So my success over 12 or 15 years of doing that and then working with nonprofits is learning how to give it away to people that are better at doing it than you are. And when you give them the credit, they feel ownership. It's not what I did. for 15 years, people could say, well, Larry, you built that from nothing. Well, yes, I did, but I just empowered people to do what they did well. And I had a philosophy in my life, even probably 10 or 12 years, is I did management by wandering around. I just spent time with all the people that were doing all the stuff, listening to them, getting to know them as people, relational development. I didn't know for sure what they were doing all the time. That really wasn't terribly important, but they felt like they were empowered to do their job. So as a result of that, yes, there was a huge growth in that organization. And to some people, well, Larry made it happen. No, I didn't really make it happen. I just empowered people to make it happen. And then I benefited for some of the credit. But it really was because I empowered other people to do it, that they all owned it. So people say, even in the book I wrote is a result of, it's called Intentional Living and Giving. And the result of that was not because I had the genius to come up with words. I had a team of people working on that 40 years ago that developed the concepts and the principles. And those guys all owned the process, girls and guys together. The result was something very powerful that changed our whole way of thinking. But I can't find any of it that is uniquely just me. Because I think about it and I think, oh, yeah, I remember so-and-so and the way he worked on that. And that principle came out of his study, not out of my study. And this one came out of me. And then I wove it together and I created the environment where we started using it. It was a team effort all the way. It wasn't a one-man band. So I think even in running countries or running a church or running a family, it's a group of people that make it work. And I think the minute we think I'm going to make it happen and it's going to be me, you're probably in trouble. So,
Yeah, and that's the problem, I think, with kind of small businesses. They start out and they trying to do everything and they're trying to control everything, when the best businesses, the ones, especially the ones that get really big, are focused on that. They're finding people who can do it better than them and bringing them in, empowering them, giving them that purpose and making them part of the whole vision.
well, you just look at in our culture today, worldwide, Elon Musk has got a huge name out there. Everything he's doing, SpaceX, his cars, the X technology, everything out there. Is he doing it himself? He's a genius in his own right. He's a thinker. He's out of the box thinking. But he doesn't spend all of his time at SpaceX. He's got qualified people that really know how to get that huge instrument of a rocket to come back and land on the ground and be usable again. Elon Musk may have come up with some concepts. Maybe he's smart in physics and other areas that lets him have the dialogue. I'm not saying he's not a smart genius, but his ability to do whatever he's doing is because he's got good people that own it with him. And he can now spend time with the US government tinkering with something else, and he tinkers with a lot of things because he's got good people that he's entrusted to get the job done. And I think that's what most people in the business, whether it's your family or whatever it is, for a guy that may be listening today, how can you empower your wife and give her credit for everything that she does to help you win? Because a lot of guys are thinking, well, I'm doing it all myself. I'm telling her what to do. No, if you're going to do that, you're going to do it all by yourself forever. Small business stays small business because they are not engaging other people with them. So, and that's true with nonprofits. I worked with nonprofits that are in 150 to 190 countries of the world. And I work with soup kitchens or a small organization in my local area. And there's a reason why one's pretty small and they're doing a good job, and one's international in scope and has thousands of people working for them, because they've learned how to empower other people, and they all win together when they do that.
Yeah, and it's important to have to have that purpose, isn't it? Because I've worked jobs where I don't feel like I'm part of the big purpose, and I don't feel like I have a purpose per se myself. And then when I feel that way, I'm just not engaged, and I'll do what I have to do. I'll do the minimum, and then I'll leave. Whereas the people who are engaged, who it really matters to, and they feel a big part of it, they feel important. They'll go above and beyond, and they'll make sure everything is so much better. Because I've had jobs like that as well, where I've felt really kind of intensely involved and like I'm a big part of it, and what I do matters, and that makes a huge difference. I suppose it's different when you got your own business because that's yours and you're already engaged in that, but trying to get a staff member to feel that's something that we all need to get better at, I think.
I was listening to a podcast just yesterday from a guy, I think he was out of Great Britain, and he was saying, we have our team put together now. And he says, we are a great team. And I'm hoping I don't have to go through any HR changes for the next 10 or 15 years because the team is working together and they all own what our cause is on our little podcast type of thing. Well, I'm thinking, my gosh, he can settle back now because he thinks he's got a team. But he said, and he commented, he says, there may come a change where somebody chooses to leave. And then I'll have to deal with changing how we do that. But it was an acknowledgement that I'm looking at the longer term. I'm not looking at the short term. And we love the teamness and we love what we're doing together. And I think that's what a leader needs to be looking at, how you build the team. You don't play soccer by yourself. It's a team effort. Now, you may be good at kicking the ball by yourself, but the collaboration of winning a game is because you've got players that are all working together. The failing soccer team is the ones that trying to have too many stars on the field, and they're all trying to outdo each other. And
Yeah.
and when you look at the captain of the soccer team, he's just one of the players. He may be good at one particular part, but you've got to have all of them working to work. It's the team effort that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, and I think as a leader, so I've had leadership roles and I've worked with other leaders who kind of like to puff their chest out, show that they know better, they are all important, and I despise that. I hate that with a passion. I think as a leader, it's about being humble and accepting and showing actually, oh, you're better than me at this. Can you do this? And having that kind of vulnerability as well to do that. My view is, as a leader, you develop people. If you can, especially in a kind of a traditional business sense where there's promotions and everything else, and people can move on to bigger and better things. My idea of success as a leader is you develop somebody so to the point where they go on and then reach your level or the level above and keep going. Because if you've done that, then you've led them and developed them because you're, I don't know, getting them to see and realize their full potential by being a leader and keeping somebody down, just so you can show that you're the boss. I really don't agree with that, and I hate when I see that.
Yeah, the minute you think you're the boss is probably the minute you're going to start shrinking in your impact. You're simply facilitating other gifted people helping you accomplish your objective. When I was growing up, I worked as a janitor, a custodian for a steel company. And I was young. I just got my driver's license, and I was not allowed to go into the manufacturing part of this huge operation because I was not 18 years of age. And the law in my state was you had to be 18 to even go in the building. It was so dangerous. It was steel fabrication. They had a huge bathroom in that room for the 100 to 150 guys that worked there. And my job every Saturday morning was to clean the bathroom. That was one of my tasks. I cleaned their office every night, the bathroom once a week, because that was the only time the entire company was shut down. There was no manufacturing going on. So I was allowed to go into the building to do one thing to accomplish that objective. And I had to learn how to get that done quickly and get out of there because I was paid by the job, not by the hour. And if he decided the owner decided I could clean that bathroom in 4 hours. That tells you how big the bathroom was. I mean, it was a filthy place that most people would not want to be. Ironically, it was all white tile. Everything was white or gray, beautiful gray floors, white tile ceiling, everything else. And it looked like an operating room when I was finished, but it looked like a charcoal gray mess that just stunk to high heaven when I started. And I had to learn to say, okay, I'm in here for a season of time. I had to be very creative to get it done. I learned how to get it done in half the time that he thought I could do it in. But I was paid for the full time because I was paid for 4 hours to clean this bathroom. sometimes you got to get creative in your alternatives, and you got to figure out. In this case, I couldn't bring anybody else in. I was the custodian for the facility, but I had to also make choices of how I was going to do the job so that I could maximize my effort. And for a year and a half or 2 years, I can't remember the years I worked there, every Saturday morning, that was my job, was to clean this stinking bathroom. And it was absolutely filthy. It was charcoal gray when I would start every Saturday morning, and my job was to turn it white again. And I learned some techniques to made it work. So sometimes you got to say, okay, here's my circumstances. This is not a good circumstance. I don't like the smell. I don't like the dirt. I don't like anything about it. I'm alone. Now, what am I going to do to maximize that so my life is not consumed for 4 solid hours in this stinking bathroom? And I think we got to sometimes look at life that way, is this is a circumstance I've got to work through. How can I maximize my life to do it? I'm a real strong believer that everybody's got these gifts and abilities, and you're here for a purpose. I think it's a biblical foundation that we are what we call stewards. A steward is not it's not a biblical term. It just means somebody in charge of somebody else's affairs. And the owner put me in charge of cleaning that room. So I was a steward of that bathroom, and I had to do it every single week, every Saturday morning. That's where I spent my time. So I became a steward of that stinking bathroom. And it is my job to turn it white. And it was my job to get it ready for the 100 men to come in on Monday morning to start to get it filthy again. And so I saw life to me was fulfilling a purpose that was assigned to me. I was a steward. I did not own the company, but I was a steward of a responsibility on behalf of the owner, to make that presentable to his 100 employees that worked in that big building. And I think when we see ourselves as stewards of what God has already endowed us to do, He didn't send us here by mistake. It's not a mistake we all showed up. Now, how are you? And you are a steward. Now, it's a question, are you going to be a good steward or a bad steward? Because you're just a steward. Now, I could have spent 4 hours and never got it done and got fired. I mean, that would have been the other alternative. But because I was a good steward, I never saw the owner ever show up. He would leave at 5 o'clock, and he knew it would be clean. The offices. He knew that on Saturday morning I would get it clean. He did not worry about the details of how I did it. He just wanted it done. And I was carrying out my responsibility to him as the owner, where I didn't own it, but I worked and faithfully performed what needed to be done to accomplish the task that he gave me. And I think each of us have got that in life. We've got, life has been given to us. How are we going to steward the life that we've been given so that we can be successful and fulfilling the task, the job description? I believe we got those job descriptions. And I think when we don't realize we have a job to do, we end up wasting time and doing crazy things. And so if our listeners this morning can think, okay, today is a responsibility that I've got. How do I fulfill that well? And how do I walk away from that? If God gave you an idea for a business, then he basically said, go do something. So how are you going to go do that? Whether it's a spiritual thing or just a very practical thing of making money. Excuse me. What are you going to do with what you got? What are you going to do to fulfill what your purpose is today? And I think if we thought that way, we would be a lot more successful in everything we do. It's a spiritual thing. It's a physical thing. It's a mental thing. It's a business thing. Because at the very core of it is you've been given the privilege of doing something. Now, are you going to do a good job or a bad job of it? So I'm really a big. I want people to enjoy and see that their life has purpose and that they can thrive rather than live in defeat and frustration and move from. I've seen people change jobs, and I see it especially in the really younger generation, the Zs and the millennials. They change jobs 5 times a year. I'm thinking, man, you weren't there long enough to even understand what the real culture was. Well, we didn't like it. Well, that just didn't fit well. I wasn't making enough money. Well, what you're basically telling me is you're wandering from pillar to post and you don't have a clue about what your life is all about. You're just trying to survive. Get in there, get something started, do it well. You may be in a job you can't stand, but do it as best you can, and that's going to lead you to another job down the way. You're going to have the stress factor of a new job. In my experience of life, I think I was fired probably, they would not call it that all the time, but I was removed from my job. Let's put it that way. In the nonprofit world, they don't always fire you, they just move you around. Okay. So, and they probably should be doing a little bit more firing at times, but that's not what always comes with the package. But I discover all the time that if I put my brain to it, I can figure it out and I can make something better out of what was given to me. Can every individual say, how do I do the better job today? Not get by. How do I thrive even in this job that I don't like? I did not like cleaning that bathroom for 15 months. The first few weeks was totally miserable because I was behind the curve all the time. And then I learned some principles and some techniques, and it became, I can do that so fast that I can get more done, but I'm paid for the 4 hours. So I could do it in 2 hours where he thought I was going to take 4. The first few weeks, it was probably 6 or 7 hours to get it clean. And then I figured out how to get this thing done right. Can you do that with everything that you're assigned to do today? Can you make your marriage that could be in chaos thrive because you're making right choices in leading the marriage? Or if you can't handle the guy and on you're the female side of the coin, can I thrive because of what it's going to benefit long term to the kids or to the other situation? It's back to choices, but it's also back to understanding I'm here for this purpose and I need to fulfill the purpose correctly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and there is a lot of people moving around in jobs in the kind of modern era. I see both sides of it. I think a lot of people who do move around jobs a lot of why they do that is because it is making them miserable. And I agree. If you're doing a job that you don't feel a big part of it, it's not fulfilling your purpose, then by all means you should move on, because it's just going to make your life miserable. If you have other options to move on and to do that, you should. What I don't agree with is people who deliberately do the minimum or do bad job whilst they're there. I still think that while you are there, you need to contribute, and then you need to, leave on good terms as well. I don't agree with this kind of leave in, throwing your toys out the pram and whinging. Like leave on good terms, because you never know, things might change. You might want to come back. You might, as you mature through life and realize, actually, it was good there. It was me. I was the problem. Now, if I go back, I'll do a better job. Those kind of things. I think we look at things too short term sometimes, and we get kind of fixated on the negative a little bit much, and kind of lean right into that. So there's two sides to it.
Yeah. Well, and I think even if you deal with difficult situations, never burn your bridge. I think many people get very frustrated. They leave. They cut off the relationship. They're mad. They're angry. They got a thing in their mind of why they're gone. I've encouraged many people, never burn your bridge. I chose not to take the negativity of the circumstance and make that the issue, because there's going to come a time when you may need that relationship again. I was working with a guy in Uganda a few years ago, and he had a situation there in Uganda. He was born and raised in the country, a very prominent leader, and he was released from a job that he loved. And it was not a good release. It was a very embarrassing thing. It was difficult. And when he came to see me here in the U.S. and he was telling me all the stuff that was going on, I said, well, you have every reason to be upset, but please don't burn your bridge here. This has got bigger implications than just who did what to you. And he says, but I want to justify this. I need to talk to you. He started he says, no, don't burn the bridge. You may need that bridge. About 3 years later, he contacted me again. He says, I took what you said to heart, and I went back and chose not to take an attack on the circumstances and not to make the issue. He says, and now the organization I'm with is benefiting huge from that because they're able to get all the materials they need from that source to accomplish another objective. He said, by not burning the bridge, I was able to get all that I needed to do another part of a ministry in Uganda. I think over and over again, we got to be careful that we don't burn bridges. I think the saddest thing I see, even in families, is when you see a couple go through a divorce, and if they burn the bridges, who is suffering the most? It's usually the kids, because the parents are still at it and the kids are in the middle of it, and they are the ones that are hurting the most because people burn bridges and there's fights and there's irritation. When you don't burn the bridge, you see kids even thriving when parents have divorced because they see that there's a respect of collaboration for their benefit. So don't burn, my advice is please never go out and burn bridges. Make the best relationship you can. It doesn't mean you're going to be friends forever. It doesn't mean you have to go out and have coffee and go play golf. It just means that we have a rapport and a respect that we can deal with the circumstances. So, my advice to people that are in those situations, don't burn the bridge. There may be a very valuable reason you've got to cross back over there again. And if the bridge is gone, the relationship is severed. So don't burn your bridge. And
if you need to get the negative energy out, or you need to have a whinge, that's what your friends are for, right? Go to your friends, have a whinge about it, moan about it, and then move on.
Yeah, it's just very important for us to keep that perspective in mind. You will survive long term by keeping your connections, and it's not worth the battle sometimes to be always right. And you may be right, but that doesn't mean that you have to fight that course of action. Let the past be the past and move on. And you're stewarding life today, not life 5 years ago. And we said something backwards.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Larry. Sometimes you may be hard done by on times in life, and with jobs and whatever else. But is the battle worth it? Are you gonna, is it gonna pay off in the long run? That you have to pick your battles, right? If it's a serious injustice and you need to fight it because it's going to cause massive consequences in life elsewhere, then by all means, you step up and you fight that. But otherwise, it's not worth it.
Well, we have a tendency to want to fight, respond with a fight when we get those situations. But are you out to win the battle or are you out to win the war? And the battle sometimes is not worth the fight that you need to go through. If you're out to win the war, the bigger picture is resolve the issue. And I think sometimes we forget that the battle is what we're after and the war is what we're trying to fight. And that is just, we just got to think, it's that's stinking thinking, if you want to use that, because now we're dealing with the wrong priority. And I think survival in life is dealing with the right priorities as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, stepping back and seeing that big picture, right?
And you got to stop. And that's right, Aaron. The word you said step back. That's what we have a hard time doing. We're so much into the mess that sometimes we can't get the perspective. I live in an area that's desert and mountains. And this morning I woke up and it was all foggy and you could not see the mountains around my house. Now, Southern California has got a lot of beauty to it, but this morning the fog came in from the ocean. I had a friend that came to visit with me, was dealing with some mental, some early memory loss. And he drove to see me one morning and he could not find me because it was so foggy that he lost his landmarks. And he was used to the landmarks. He was not a danger, But because he did not have the landmarks and he could not see the mountains and he could not see where he was going, he ended up someplace else. That is just simply because he did not have perspective. Because the next day it was clear in town and he could have driven to see me as easy as possible. Because sometimes we get caught up in the fog and we do not realize the implications. We forget where we're going when we get lost. And and that would be I know one time I was speaking at a retreat for a group of people up in the mountains near where I live. And I got to the top of the mountains and I got into a fog bank and I could not see the white lines down the center of the road. It was so bad. Now, for about 15 minutes, I was afraid to drive forward because there could be somebody in front of me. I could not pass anybody because you couldn't see anybody in the other lane. I was afraid somebody could come up behind me and hit me from behind. And I knew on the edge of the other side of the passenger side of my car was a cliff. I was not thinking about the retreat I was going to speak in for about 15 minutes. I was in survival mode to get to where the fog lifted enough that I knew where the road was. Life will sometimes bring you those circumstances. And you've got to deal that 15-minute season or 20-minute season, whatever's there, and say, I've got to get through this before I can refocus. But you don't have to always live in the fog forever. The fog is going to lift. The circumstances will change. So don't allow the fog to define your destiny, because that's a crazy way to live. I mean, it will lift. Circumstances will change. You will see it better, but give yourself some time to see it better. And you've got to sometimes get out of the place, go for a walk, go for a drive, keep your mouth shut for 24 hours. Circumstances will do it. But if you don't make the choice to take those steps, you're going to be getting yourself in a real mess.
I love
Retaliation
that,
is not a way of life. Retaliation won't get you any place.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's just too much negative energy, right? It just kind of drags us all down.
It drive you all crazy.
Larry, where can people find you if they want to kind of connect with you or learn a bit more about you, or maybe even pick up your book?
Well, there's a couple of things they could do. They can go to larryonan.com. It's just my name, Larry Onan. The only difference is my Irish name and the culture of the internet does not allow for the apostrophe to go there. So the name is Larry Onan. It looks Irish. They say it came from the Irish culture. There's even debate about that, but larryonan.com. And that's where you find the book. I also do blogging over there. I do other connections. But the book, I can, internationally, it's probably better to go to your favorite book source in your own country. And, you can buy it through Amazon. You can buy it through all kinds of directions. And you can get the book. The book is called Intentional Living and Giving. The word intentional is very important to it because you've got to wake up every day saying, I intend to do this. I choose to do this. I will do this. Living a life, that's part of it, and then giving yourself to other people. And it's not about money. There is one chapter in 19 chapters about money because people think that I must be talking about giving, so it must be money. I'm talking about giving 100 things that you can give in life. And one of those things is money. So I'm not afraid to talk about money. I think the stewards got money to give and we should be giving it. But I outline in that book 9 principles of living a life of stewardship. And then the rest of the book is applications. How do we do this? How do we live life from day to day? So the book is called Intentional Living and Giving. And yes, anybody, any place can get it. I've got friends in Great Britain that I've already got copies. If you go to my website, find the place that says free digital copy, and you can get a free digital copy of the book and put it in your Kindle or whatever your book device is that you want to. You can start reading it, and I'll give it to you free. You can get it that way. But that's one way to do it. The other, just hunt it down. You can go onto Amazon today and put in Intentional Living and Giving, or Larry Onan, and that's what you're going to see come up. And yeah, I'd be glad to help anybody out there that wants to get a copy of it, to help them get into the content. I'd be glad to give them a copy of it.
Amazing. Thank you, Larry. Before I bring the episode to a close, Larry, do you have any kind of final thoughts or messages that you want to leave people with?
Figure out who you are as a person. Come to grips with why you were here in the first place, and then fulfill that life. And I'm going to get you into the book. When you get there, you're going to find out what changed my life. There's a lot of my own stories in there. I was transformed by the concepts that are in the book. So not only did we come up with a way of delivering it, but it's a life story of how I came to grips with all this myself. I mean, I would encourage people to not be afraid of a spiritual answer. A spiritual answer is probably going to be what you want, because we're spiritual creatures. And then there's the practicality of living that life in the context of who you understand you really are. And find a way to know what your strengths are. I believe in, there's the Gallup organization in the United States developed the thing called Strength Finders. You can go into the Gallup organization. Strength Finders is available. You can take the minimal test, I think, for free. You pay a few bucks for another level of the test. Understand who you are. And if you know who you are and your strengths, and you live according to who you really are, your life is going to be dramatically different than if you just did education and got there. And realize that in the younger ages, you're collecting knowledge. As the older you get, you're going to have more wisdom to put on the table. I had a lot of knowledge when I started off, and I was a wing and a prayer. Then you start to learn from all those lessons in life, and that starts to percolate into wisdom. So be finding other people that have already been there and done that, have lived life, and rely on them for some wisdom and insight. That's why a book like mine is helpful to you, because I can impart some of the wisdom. There's hundreds of people that can impart wisdom. Sometimes it's the grandpa down the street, and you need to sit there and just give him a beer or have a good cup of coffee with him and have him tell life experiences, because that's going to be the wisdom of life. And say, how can I use this? I'm not just accommodating an old man to tell me a story. I'm trying to pick up what made life work for him and where life failed for him. And then get into, I think the Bible is a very critical part. To me, it's a life book. The book of Proverbs is the books of wisdom from the wisest man that was recognized that probably ever lived. So pick up wisdom and seek wisdom as you're learning how to utilize your strengths. So those are the kind of things I'm encouraging. And yes, I'd love to have you get a copy of the book, because I think it's going to help you.
That's great advice there, Larry. And I think that's really important, because as a human race, we have, built upon the generations before us. That's how we've got the technology we've got today, because we've continued to build on what others have done before us, right? It's standing on the shoulders of giants, I call it. And it's really important that we do that we, that we use the wisdom of the generations that come before us to kind of grow and surpass and keep moving forward.
That's right. So I just, life is to be lived and life is to be learned. And you will learn everything you have as an experience that you can learn from. You've got the freedom to fail. Failure does not mean you're crashing to the bottom. Failure means you didn't do it quite right. You tweak it and you do it again. And when I realized I had the freedom to fail, I tried things that I never thought were possible, because all I knew is I could pick it up and retool it and do it again. So, the listeners today, you got the freedom to fail. You need to figure out your strengths. You need to figure out what your real purpose in life is. And then you need to go at it with gusto, because there's a life
it takes
to
courage,
live.
right? It takes courage to be willing to fail like that as well. So it's really failing isn't a bad thing.
There's a lot of opportunities. When you're driving 70 miles an hour down a road and you come to a curve, you've got to have your attention on the curve and how to steer your car. Otherwise, you're going to go off. Life is full of curves. We have curves people say, well, it's a straight line between here and the town over XYZ, and you think, no, it's not really straight. There's bridges, there are roads, turn, twist, so forth. And if I don't navigate correctly, I could go off on the road over here and I could do this over there. Life is full of curves. Navigate them and stay alert, because when you're alert, you're going to pick up and start doing things correctly. So those are my couple thoughts I got to you, Aaron, there for what can help maybe the listeners are listening today.
That was brilliant. Thank you for your time today, Larry, and thanks for talking to us. I've loved every second of it, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Thank you.
It's been great to be with you this morning, Aaron. Thank you. Have a good day.
No problem. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again for being part of this journey. Stay tuned. We've got even more great conversations coming your way.